Are you a business owner stuck in fear, doubt, and worry about what the marketplace will look like in the future? Then this show is for you. Strap on your seatbelt and get ready to disrupt and innovate. Here's your host, Lisa Levy.
Get ready to supercharge your sales game with our next guest, Katie Nelson. She's a sales aficionado who believes that sales is not only a profession, but a love language. With an impressive 25 years of experience across various sales roles and now her third business venture, Katie brings us a wealth of knowledge and a passion for the sales lifecycle. From mastering the art of the initial cold call to nurturing lifelong client relationships, Katie's journey in sales has been nothing short of remarkable. She specializes in working with entrepreneurs and sole proprietors, and Katie's expertise extends beyond selling techniques. She helps her clients identify their unique sales process and crafts tailored programs to streamline business practices for maximum efficiency and profitability. So join us today as we delve into Katie's insights and the ability for her to revolutionize your approach to sales, which would put more money in your company coffers and your pockets. And the best part is she does it with all love and no BS. Katie, welcome to the conversation.
Well, thanks, Lisa. I'm happy to be here.
So in this space, we're all about no BS. And I appreciate that about you so much, right? We're here to do the real reels. But for the audience, tell them a little bit about your journey and what brought you to what you're doing today and why it's so important that you're doing it now.
Wonderful. I'll see if I can remember all of those. How I got to where I am today was completely by accident and a little bit by choice. I've been a boots on the ground salesperson forever. And I don't know, a little over a decade back, I was asked by a mentor of mine in my last industry to start a business with him because he said, of course, the magic words, I can imagine doing this with no one else. So that is how my first business was born. And of course, through that partnership, at that point in time, I hadn't really thought to care about the fact that I owned a business. I did exactly the same thing. I was a business development executive. I was a salesperson. The next business that I owned, it was a little bit more of an evolution in that I owned more of owning the business and also selling. And then after that business, that little under 3 years, I generated a $6 million run rate for that business. And before I chose to go out on my own and become a sales uprising. That's how that happened. And why it's so important today is because, one, I think, Lisa, it's always been important. I think why it's important that I'm here today is because I have a very unique perspective. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I am not the person who would have ever said I would have owned my own business because I know it's hard. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have thought, if you're good in sales, you're good in sales and you will always be able to collect a check and have whatever lifestyle you want. So I would not have thought that this is where I would be. And I can't imagine doing any other work. For me, it is vastly important that solopreneurs, sole proprietors understand their role in their community beyond themselves and their business, and that they work towards creating a longer runway for themselves so they can be successful. The statistics that we see are all failure all the time. And I would love it if the legacy that I leave and that Sales Uprising leaves is that we increased the success rate of small businesses as reported by the Small Business Administration.
Well, absolutely, because the failure rate is absolutely terrifying. In the read back of your journey, one of the things that you talked about, right, is getting into the owning more of the ownership. I love that mindset because I come from a family of entrepreneurs and swore I would never be one because the peaks are fun, but the valleys suck, right? The pain, feast, famine, it can be a really hard, roller coaster ride to constantly be on. And the corporate world realized that there's no more security in that space, and you're doing everything on somebody else's terms.
Yep.
So, right, finding the space into entrepreneurship is so incredibly liberating and terrifying. And for everybody who's been listening to this program for a while, really hard work.
Preach it, Lisa. Like,
Yeah.
what I say to my clients is that entrepreneurship, business ownership, regardless of whether or not you choose to identify yourself as a founder, a president, a CEO, like whatever title you give yourself as the chief cook and bottle washer, it's a study in duality, and it will never, there is nothing on this earth that I have found or that has been explained to me that I can say requires more of you as a human being than being a business owner. You can't afford to have the emotions that you can have when you're an employee, right? You can't, you have to really be very comfortable with holding your own counsel and working your intuition to understand who you can trust, right? So it's a really interesting thing. And I think one of the most disruptive things that I say is that, being a business owner requires more of you than even being a parent. And the example that I give of that is that, when you're driving in traffic and you're late for a dentist appointment and Johnny at 7 years old or Janie is kicking the back of your seat, screaming because the baby's screaming, and you just lose your ish, right? Like you are stopped in traffic, you pound your head up, your hands on the steering wheel and you're like, knock it off, right? You don't get to do, and then you afterwards, of course, you take the kids out of the car and you say, sorry, mommy, had a moment. I understand that wasn't the right way to react. I apologize. Thank you. That's not a thing you get to do with your clients or your employees or your vendors. That's not really, you don't get to have that moment as a CEO.
You don't get to have that moment as a CEO and at all. Don't make me pull this car over.
Right.
Don't make me pull this car over. And maybe we should actually have those moments as CEOs and leaders. I just sort of that timeout, right? You guys, this is all out of control, but it's not how it works.
Nope.
It is absolutely not how it works. But in that, in what you were describing, and we're going to here's my first tangent for the day, Katie, right? The idea of work-life balance and entrepreneurship. There's a lot in there because it's a myth, right? Right. It is not a teeter-totter, right? It's not all one thing or all the other. It is walking on, my analogy is it's walking on jello all of the time, right? So in your world for working with your clients, right? How are they juggling that mindset? How do you, and sales is a big part of making that fear go away, because having good business, having profitable, let me try that word again, profitable business, it makes a difference.
Yes, it does. So how my clients handle it is how we all handle it. Like sometimes great and sometimes not so great. Right. There's that lovely up and down line. And so with sales, so this is why my business coaching business is called Sales Uprising. So many lessons can be derived from a sales life cycle. The foundations of ownership and leadership can be found in sales roles, along with this really amazing benefit of if you can sell, you have the ability to make everything else better, right? You have cash flow coming in. In the beginning, it's just cash flow. We don't know if it's even profitable. Then we understand what our costs are, so we work to make it profitable. But it all starts with selling.
Yes.
And in sales. So there's that. And let's be clear, sometimes it's a high peak, sometimes it's a low valley, and sometimes it's going to look like a really scary EKG where those two things are literally back to back. And so the goal of a good salesperson is to stay directly in the middle of those. And that's also true for entrepreneurs. If we are our business and our business is fluctuating with our emotion, then what does our business look like? What can my clients expect? What am I delivering? So, we're looking for an even keel. We're looking for a nice riding the middle. And I would say that, so for me, the work-life balance, I completely agree. I don't know that it's a myth. I would say it's more of a continuum or a spectrum. I think that at times you can see what that looks like, and it's not for very long periods of time. I think that's also true for employees. I think a work-life balance is upside down there because if you hold a traditional 9 to 5 job, 8 hours of a day is 8 hours of a day. Entrepreneurs can tell you what their days look like from a work perspective, right? Depending on where they are in business. But as you know, I deal a lot with startup businesses that are looking to expand. So it's not very true that they have much work-life balance, as long as it is for, there are so many amazing cliches, and the reason why they're cliches is because they're real. So there's a season, a reason, or a lifetime. We've all heard this saying. And so as long as we are cognizant and intentional and aware that the hard work we are putting in right now is for a reason, depending on how quickly we can understand and bob and weave and move and grow, it may be just for a reason, or may end up being a season of growth.
Yep.
But that output is not meant to be for the lifetime, either of you or for your business.
Well, that output, that pace, that startup level of energy is unsustainable over time, right? That's how people burn out, have heart attacks, die in some cases, right? This is, it happens. And so in this space, when I talk with clients and other people, right, one of the themes that's always a pain point, right, are sales. And many entrepreneurs are business operators. They have the idea of the product, they have the idea of the service. They may even be, right, a specialized profession. It may be a medical person who has, right, we've now created a medical device. What do they know about sales? Absolutely nothing. And
I disagree with you. So
okay.
I'm sorry. Please, I want you to finish your sentence, but I had to tell you that I disagree with you before I forget that. So please continue.
Well, we'll remember that, right? But right, their focus, their mission is on solving a problem, curing a patient, doing whatever. In their education and their background, there was nothing that actually prepared them to sell. So you think that maybe there is. So what is that you think is there that I'm missing?
Okay. Why do you go to a doctor?
Because they are credentialed and capable and educated, and they know things that I will never know.
How'd you find
I
out?
hope.
Right? Like, so here's the thing. So even if we take it outside of school, they may not, there are very few classes in college or formal education that involve selling. I think the closest things that we can say, so I have an interdisciplinary studies degree in communication and sociology. And so the closest classes that I ever took that had anything to do with that, and I didn't go for my MBA, like all the stuff, would be communications classes. So when you're talking about negotiation, as an example, within sales, negotiation has a very specific place, but I would tell you to some extent, the entire conversation is kind of negotiation. You're negotiating your space, they're negotiating their space, and we're not even talking about the dollars and cents of it all yet. So every single human on earth has learned to communicate.
Some
right?
more effectively than others, though, right? So
fair.
right.
But my point is how we started this, the reason why I had to have this outburst, for which I apologize. But the reason why I had this outburst is because every single person comes with their own understanding of human communication and what that looks like. So while you may not have had a class, to say that anybody goes into owning a business without any understanding of selling is actually, in my opinion, vastly the wrong side of the lens to look at that from.
Okay.
Right? I talk more to my people about, so great. So you've never had a job that sold something. Now we understand that that's the case. Let's talk about all the things you do bring to the table. Now this is especially true when we're talking about high level of services, right? So when it's services based, it has a much more human touch, right? If we're buying a pen off Amazon, it's a relatively low touch, low human interaction type of thing. So this is especially true for when a doctor not only has to be credentialed, if that's what you are looking for, but then once you meet them, they have to follow through on what you think those credentials should provide you with. So everything that happens from then on is them doing that. And if they don't, and here's the scary thing for doctors, they don't really ever get the chance to do that. They have to walk into the room and assume, which is the scariest thing you can do in sales. They have to assume while you're there, unless they say, so what brings you in today and how did you get here?
And we don't need to beat the doctor analogy to death.
Oh
because
no, it could be anybody.
Right. It could be anybody. And I would also contend that in that field, there are a tremendous number of people who lack communication skills, and the idea of bedside manner has probably been lost over time quite a bit, but that's a different soapbox.
I was going to say, that's a different podcast, Coral.
Yeah, that's a totally different rant of mine that I'll take to a different, we don't have to go there. But oftentimes, right, I see entrepreneurs, right, the number one thing that, pain points that exist, right? Do we have enough leads? Do we have enough, right? Do we have a sales process? Do we understand what it is and how it works? And how do we keep things top of funnel? And what the hell is top of funnel?
And are you talking about your marketing funnel or your sales funnel?
Yes.
Right. And so therein lies a crux of the, because, and I'm going to use your words, even though I know, right? Sales and marketing are two terms that are thrown about as if they are the same function for your business. And when you're newer in business, they sound a lot the same, right? Like from a fear perspective, you need me to talk to people about who I am. You need me to tell them what I do. You need me to you need me to take a picture of myself and put it online so people can see me, i.e. the marketing piece, right? That can be supremely scary for some people. And then there's the sales part, right? You want me to ask people about their budget? What is wrong with you? Oh my gosh. You want me to ask them if they want to buy from me? I can't do that. What if they didn't like me after that? Right? And I don't say that from a people-pleasing perspective. New entrepreneurs, the majority of us aren't into people-pleasing. We're just trying to make it work for ourselves. But we don't like rejection. No human likes rejection, or even the perception of rejection. So both sales and marketing are super scary. That does not make them have the same function in your business, nor are they the same thing. A marketing funnel is vastly different than a sales funnel. Therefore, they hold two whole separate purposes. Now, they, like winning, relay teams in the Olympics, have to have clean handoffs in an effort for it to work. And they are on the same team, but they run different legs of the race.
Absolutely. And so with Sales Uprising, one of the things that you do that I think is unique in the space is you don't try to fit everybody into a predefined sales process. That it is you're going to do these 3 things, these 5 things every time, right? That you actually get to know the business, what it is that they're doing and how they're trying to do it so that you can create their sales process. Why is that so important to you? And it is different from almost everybody else.
So one, I want to make a small correction. We don't make customized programs. What we do is we teach everybody the same thing, and what bubbles up and works for them, bubbles up and works for them. So that at the end of the day, my clients have created their own sales program, which is really how it will work best and most efficiently. Right. And the reason why it would be different in the entirety of the space is because to create customized programs per client makes you an unscalable business. Right. That's why people don't do it. With that being said, we don't have, if you are looking for sales training, there are amazing places to go get sales training. Right. I'm sure you have some people you refer all the time. You can put them in the show notes. For Sales Uprising, it's important for our clients to understand that as a business owner, how they need to be the number one salesperson in their business. If you are a sole proprietor and you do not have the funding, whether it's because you're just not interested in getting it, you don't have the education to go get it, or it's not appropriate that you get it. If you are a bootstrapped business, the number one thing that's going to feed you and allow you to continue your entrepreneurial journey is sales. So the very first thing you have to do and get over from a fear perspective, should you have that fear, is selling. And so we teach you what selling is in the broadest sense, and we'll show you what it looks like in a very specific sense. But how each person hears that, processes it, practices it, and then gets it to work for them is absolutely not prescribed.
So I love in what you just said, for context, my degree is in communication. And as you're describing that experience, what you're doing is closing the communication loop, right? So when I say something to you, what you hear and what it means to you may or may not be what I intended. And so with your clients, you are specifically closing a communication loop so that they, at the macro level, understand what sales is. And at the micro level, they know what their responsibility is.
You win. You are right. Yes.
It is fundamentally that simple. And I love that, right? You were schooling me that all sales is communication, and boom, your process is exactly closing the loop of communication.
Imagine that. And here's one of the words that you and I both hear a lot in this space has to do with relationship. Mm-hmm. And so from a communications perspective, both macro and micro, when you think about how you create relationship, how does one do that? Regardless of whether it's verbal or nonverbal, the amount of communication that has to happen is huge.
Absolutely.
So it's, when I say that sales is as easy as creating a relationship, that's just my truth.
And fundamentally, we know that I'm going to make the big, bold, sleazy sales approach doesn't work, right? It's gross.
Oh, you think so? Do you?
I do. I don't, used car lots, not my favorite, that high pressure sell. But if you build a relationship and you make commitments and you honor those commitments and you deliver over time, that client is going to be there for the long haul. And they're going to come back to you with their next problem and their next opportunity. And it is not transactional. It is an actual relationship.
Yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. And this is what I mean by that. The person on the used car lot that is perceived to be sleazy by someone who would not choose to sell that way still is rich and does a great job. So there are people who buy from them. There is nothing wrong with how that person sells, and it's obvious because they sell, right? And if they did sell, whoever they sold to might actually go back to them because however that transaction had to happen, worked for the person who bought it. So this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about every single person has their own style. You perceive it to be sleazy because it is certainly how you would not. That says more about you than about sales as a function. You don't want to be that. Fantastic. Please don't. It wouldn't work for you if you tried. I have so many conversations with introverts versus extroverts, sleazy sales, snake oil sales, hardcore transactional sales versus relational and consultative sales. And what I would tell you is it all sells. When you're a new business, your business only eats cash. It will only ever eat cash. It doesn't care about your feelings. It doesn't care that there's oxygen in the room. It only feeds off money. Your best interest, if you want this passion to work, if you want this purpose to take off, if you want to be able to pay your mortgage or buy your third home from the money that you generate from this thing, you have to get over whatever your perception is and just own your sales identity. That's it. It's super simple. You can do it however you want. Your clients will find you. Your vibe attracts your tribe. Let the fear go. Try it out. See what works.
So in the beginning, right, part of your mantra is there is no BS. And you're right. Effective selling happens in all sorts of different ways. And there's all sorts of things running through my head of the examples of what I just personally absolutely despise and gives me the screaming heebie-jeebies. But when you stopped me in the thinking, some of those individuals are gazillionaires because it resonates to somebody.
Right.
And
It resonates to their buyer, right, Lisa?
yeah,
So at the end of the day, you guys, selling isn't about us. It's only so much about us.
yeah.
It's about them. And if you do it in a way that's authentic and transparent for you, you'll figure out who your people are.
And right, the other nugget in that, right? It's about them. Our clients, our customers are the center of our universe. Whatever it is that we're doing, if it is not driving and adding value to them, why are we doing it? Never
You're
forget to
right.
ask that question. Never forget to ask that question. That's, reiterating to the audience, it's not new information. Don't forget it.
And this is
Katie,
not to say that the customer's always right. That again is
no,
also another podcast entirely.
that
But
is
yeah,
another podcast entirely because quite often they're wrong.
that's
But that's different. We're leaving that one. We've got two other topics for maybe it's just another time when we're sitting and having sharing a meal and we can just go through all of that. In the work that you do with your business owners, I am sure that there is somewhere in here a story about a challenge and an obstacle that you had to help somebody work through to get to where you knew they could be and where they should be. You have a story you can share with us.
oh my gosh, I have so many, but I'll take the most that I'm gonna say simple, but what I mean is most relatable.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we do, so I had one of my very, very first clients when I became a coach, when I still had my own insecurities about what I was selling. Hello, I too have insecurities. And I was convinced that the only reason anybody would want to work with me is because I would sell for them and not help them understand the importance of them owning the number one sales spot for their business if they're the only one in their business. And so this lovely woman we'd been introduced, we met each other at a networking group. She's like, I absolutely want to talk to you. And the first part of the meeting, I was like, I just need to be very, very clear to make sure I meet your expectations. I'm not going to sell for you. And I'll never forget, she laughed at me and she's like, oh, that's good. I don't think I can afford that. And that's not what I'm looking for. So there was that. So the story is about her. She did all the right things. She went to networking groups and she introduced herself beautifully. And she would take your business card and she would say she would follow up. And she was doing all the right things and to no avail. Mm. And so when we dug a little bit further in one of our private sessions, I said, can you walk me through your week? And can you show me the business cards? And then can you tell me what happens to them afterwards? And she said, sure. And so she did that. And I said, oh, I see. So she would get all these business cards. And ultimately, she in her mind would look at a business card, remember the person, remember the business and the interaction. And she would decide for them that they wouldn't buy from her. Now, I see your face, Lisa, like, oh, of course, that would never happen to me. Oh, wait, maybe I've done that, right? Every single one of us has done that. We assume all of the time. And so when you get your big stack of business cards and you say, oh yeah, no, they had real potential. Oh no, they're never going to be a buyer. The biggest problem, the biggest challenge, the biggest concern with that is that your data is not right. You don't have correct data because you aren't even starting with the right numbers. So I would rather you just call the whole stack and then figure out if that person really was, if your gut instinct or your thought, or maybe you just didn't hear what they said. Like so many things could have happened at that networking event. Or maybe you just didn't like the font of their business card. Is that a reason to assume that they wouldn't buy from you? Or are you like, is your business struggling to breathe because it has no cash, or could it be worth calling that person? And then figuring out if your instinct was right, like focusing on intuition. And yep, I knew it. I had 5 cards that I said that wouldn't buy. And I can tell you now that they wouldn't, and why, outside of my own initial thought. Or, ooh, it might have been that was a brown business card. And, I don't even use UPS because I don't like brown. So, don't assume, especially in the beginning of your process. And I will tell you that the first time, and it was months later, she came to me and said, I just want to tell you that you are going to be so proud of me. I am so giddy. And I was like, oh, tell me. And I'm thinking maybe she landed the biggest client of her life or whatever it was. She goes, I have actively practiced. I have started to notice when I do this for myself in this practice. I notice when I'm about to put a card to the side that says no, and I put it right back in my pile. And I have had more calls and more conversions since. And I almost cried for her because, you guys, it's habit, it's ingrained, it's unconscious, and it doesn't give us what we need to succeed as business owners or number one salespeople.
The thread in that is so imperative for everybody to catch is data drives outcomes. And if we're making our decisions based on a feeling and we haven't quantified it, we're probably doing ourselves a disservice. And it is really, really important to make those calls and have, right, an initial interaction in a networking scenario. 90% of the time is not going to actually tell you whether or not that person is potentially a client or is a prospect in any way, shape, or form, right? You have to actually have that next conversation where you can elicit the information to quantify and qualify their potential to be your client.
Yes. And so I'm going to give y'all a hack this to drive home this point. You wouldn't take, so because, let me walk them through this. The reason why I'm saying this is because, as you were saying, so Katie, let's talk about this. This is true. Feelings aren't facts. Data is where it's at. And I thought, oh, but first impressions, right? People can say, but my first impression, this card because of my first impression. So this is the kind of hack that I want to give you about that in regards to networking. It is highly unlikely that upon first impression, should the person be so, make such a hideous first impression, there would be no reason you would have that business card. Don't forget, first impressions happen within the first 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Yeah. So those are the people that are all the way over on the other side of the room that you made sure you didn't find yourself in conversation with. It's highly.
I want to say that one more time, right, everybody? The first impression happened before you were close enough to them to have a conversation to get the card. So the potential is there, or you would never have their card on your person to begin with. It's that simple.
Right.
Katie, this is so much fun. Will you share with the guests how they can find you? What are your website, the socials, the places where they can learn more about you and Sales Uprising?
Oh, thank you, Lisa. I have some really fun, cute clips of fun sales hacks on YouTube at Sales Uprising. You can find me on LinkedIn. My company page is at Sales Uprising. My Facebook company page is also at Sales Uprising. Website at Sales Uprising. Contact us. Or you can email me at Katie@Sales Uprising. If you guys aren't getting it, I really just want you to have a Sales Uprising. And if you can't make that happen for yourself, I'm Katie. Get in touch.
And for everybody who's watching or listening, all of that information will be in the show notes, so you can absolutely copy and paste it and get to her the fastest way possible. Mm-hmm. In our conversation today, Katie has taken us on the journey to understand what sales is all about, and it's really simple. It's communication. And her little hack at the end is the most important thing to remember. A first impression happens before you even think that it has happened. And so if you have a stack of cards from a networking event, call those people, because your first impression told you they were worth having a conversation with. This was tons of fun, and audience members, you know the rules. Don't get left behind. Join me next time.
That's it for today's episode of Disrupt and Innovate. Head over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Every single week, one lucky listener that posts a review on iTunes will win the grand prize drawing of $15,000 private VIP day with Lisa Levy. And be sure to head over to disruptandinnovate.com and get your free copy of Lisa's gift and join us on our next episode.